Okay, so we are live, everybody, so we'll start today's meeting. So thank you all for coming to our meeting this evening. It's the meeting of the Communities Public Protection and Housing Scrutiny Review Board at 6 p.m. on Monday, the 20th of January 2025. Happy New Year to everybody that I've not already seen before now. We'll make our way through the agenda. So any apologies for this meeting? I've got apologies so far from Councillor Celia Ingle. No further apologies. So late items to be introduced by the Chair. There are none for this meeting. Item 3, declarations of interest. Anybody have a declaration of interest at all? No, fantastic. Okay, so move on then to item 4, some minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of November 2024. Anybody, any issues with those minutes at all? No, we're all happy to accept them? Fantastic. Brilliant. So we'll head on then to item 5. So this is our bulky waste collection service. So I'll hand over to officers to present this one, and if you can just introduce yourself the first time you speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, I'm Sam Kelly, Acting Head of Refuse Collection and Street Cleansing. So today is a report to provide an overview of the bulky waste collection service. And there's a couple of recommendations within the report. One is to note the contents, and the other one is to make any comments or recommendations following the report. So Derby City Council provides services for residents to manage their waste, and that includes municipal curbside waste collections, a bulky waste collection service, a provision of the household waste recycling centre. So bulky collections can be made for domestic properties only, and residents do not need to be at home on the day of collection, and the waste is to be presented by 8:30 on the morning of. So residents can book a bulky waste, and during the booking, they tell us what waste they would like us to collect. There is a charge for this service, and that is based on what items are being collected and the number of items, and section 4.3 of the report gives a breakdown of the current charges. So within the booking system, you'll see in some brackets as you go through the booking page, there's either a J, an M or an SF. So that's either junk, metal or soft furnishings. And that's because we collect these waste types separately based on waste processing and disposal legislation. So once a resident has selected the items for disposal, they're offered a choice of dates for the collection. So residents select a collection date for each of the waste streams, and only available dates will be presented. They then progress to the payment page and the form is submitted. So the operation is split into 2 areas. So there's a number of wards in the north of the area, and that is collected on a Monday and a Wednesday, and a number of wards in the south of the area, and that is collected on either a Tuesday and a Thursday. So our forms are integrated with a system that we use in waste and street cleansing called Whitespace. And the bulky waste service was introduced on Whitespace in 2023. And that really digitised the service, so moved us away from a paper-based system. So Whitespace controls how many slots are available for each day and what collection days are available. So we have 15 slots for each waste stream, so that's a total of 45 available slots per day. And the service runs 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday. And at the end of each day, Whitespace will optimise the rounds for the following collection day. So we have the benefits there of route optimisation. So the team consists of 2 vehicles, each with a driver and an operative, and they work off a digital device. So they've got each worksheet for each booking with the details of the collection address and what waste is to be collected. And there is an outcome field that the operatives then complete whilst on site, which gives details such as all items collected or no items presented, and that determines what feedback and what correspondence goes back to the resident. So in 2023, a decision was approved to remove the charge of the system for 2 weeks a year and enable free bookable bulky waste collections for residents who books in this time. So the charge remains in place at all other times. So this was delivered in weeks determined by street pride, and that was spring and winter from April 2024. So that was introduced as part of a commitment around improving the environment, recycling more, reducing fly tipping, public realm improvements, and making the service available to those who cannot afford to pay for a bulky waste collection. And providing 500 free bulky waste collection slots is a loss of income to the service, and that's approximately £18,000. So to facilitate this change, no changes were required to the frontline service delivery model. That stayed the same. And the reasons for selecting the spring and the winter months were based on kind of possible resident behaviours, where residents could have a spring clean and then a further clean after the summer. So section 4.15 gives a breakdown of the free collections by ward for 2024. So in addition to the free trials, there is an initiative currently being trialled, and that's the provision of the bulky waste collection vouchers to those in need. So that provides a free collection, which is generally 1 to 3 items. And that's currently being trialled in the Symphon and Osmiston ward and managed by the neighbourhood team who funded this initiative, so dedicated £3,000 of the neighbourhood budget to support the trial. The scheme is accessed by a referral by either a local area coordinator, social housing or someone from social care, and helps, for example, low-income families, often with no car access, those who are socially isolated or vulnerable, including recently bereaved people, to dispose of their waste. And we're still in a trial, but current feedback is that the scheme is proving very successful, and we could look to scale this up to cover other wards where car ownership and disposable income is limited, and that could be supported by education regarding the awareness to dispose legitimately of their waste. So feedback results from both the free bulky waste collections and the trial of the bulky waste collection vouchers were considered by Cabinet earlier this month. And I think that gives an overview of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Fabulous. Sam, thank you so much for providing that report and a really, really good run through of what's in there as well. Any questions from members of the committee at all? Yep, Councillor Pandy.
So, you planning? So you quoted Symphon and Osmaston about the bulky waste collection vouchers. So is it something council is also planning to offer vouchers to people, or it just has to go through the board?
Thank you, Councillor Pandy. So this is something that's currently being trialled. It's a new kind of initiative. Initially, we don't have any funding for this, so this is trialled and funded via the board budget. And I suppose really it's gathering that feedback and presenting it to Cabinet.
Okay, any further questions from anybody at all? Yep, Councillor Nawaz.
Yeah, just if you look at the figures on 4.415, where, you know, Arboretum ward is only 18 number of bookings, Normanton is 26. Do you think, why is that? Do you know why?
I think if I can just add in before the answer, because that touched on to one of the questions I had, as well as that sort of element of it, which I do think surprised quite a few people to see, are there any patterns in the data that the service has picked up on that they've noticed across all the wards as well?
Thank you, Councillor. So I suppose there is a spread of the bookings across the wards. I suppose one of the ideas around the initiative that we're trialling in Symphon and Osmiston is to try a different approach, because we are aware that some of these wards need the service more and have more demand than I suppose others do. But it is positive that there is a spread across the wards.
So I wanted to finish my question, like, you know, these two are the worst wards with the waste management. When we used to have the bulky collection before, I'm sure Simon would know there used to be a lot of waste taken from there. I think it's because of the booking system. online. A lot of people don't like doing it online. There should be a change to booking system in the future.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think one of the key things with the current scheme, as you said, as you suggested, is that people do have to go online or ring up to make that booking. We did see a spread across the whole city, but the numbers in those areas where we would have liked the uptake to be higher is actually quite low. And I think this is the benefit of the voucher system. So with the vouchers, what we're doing is making them available. That will be rolled out across the city. So other wards will be able to purchase some vouchers to be used in their areas. And we're hopeful that from the information we're seeing from the trial so far, is that when this is rolled out, we'll be able to ensure that these vouchers make it to the people that need them most. So that'll be done through local area coordinators, forums, neighbourhood managers and officers. So we're hoping that they will make it to the people that need it the most. Thank you.
Thank you. I told you you'd end up speaking, Simon. Councillor Pandey, I saw your hand again.
What I think of the whole process, Street Pride spends every year a significant, very high amount to mop up the fly tipping and all those kind of things. It's a huge amount what we are spending year after year. Have we thought about reducing the price of bulky waste collection further? I think Nottingham charges less compared to Derby. So have we thought on those lines, rather than only offering this to selective people? I know what you're saying, but I am also fearful of the fact that some residents may say, why only few are getting benefited of the vouchers? What about the rest of us? Why are we being overlooked?
Thank you, Councillor. So I suppose our current pricing model is benchmarks. We did some recent benchmarking across different local authorities. And although one of our strands was around kind of the similar to our neighbouring authorities, the others were actually quite low in comparison. So benchmarked across the country, the charges are reasonable. We haven't, when we've changed any of the prices, we haven't seen that impact on fly tipping like we initially hoped. So it's hard to determine whether the pricing does affect the amount of fly tipping. Thank you.
Just to add into that one, when we looked at what other authorities do, is it the same in terms of the charging the same price for one as for 3 items, or is that something other authorities haven't done?
Thank you. So all authorities generally have a breakdown of how many items or what kind of items are being collected, and it's our earlier one that is the one that is relatively kind of similar to other authorities, and as we're scaling up the number of items, we generally do charge lower.
Fantastic, thanks, Sam. Yep, Councillor Pandey, so you again, and then Councillor Falk, I'll come to you after.
So again, Simon knows I've been trying to work out solution with the council for this thing for a long time, and the fly tipping is obviously it's increasing year after year. So you are saying that you are looking to do bulky. You did 500 people, which didn't help many people anyway. Bulky waste collection. Are you looking into some other areas, like maybe what are people who fly tip and they get away with it? Is there any thought given to that?
Thank you, Councillor Pandey. So I think some local authorities have offered free bulky waste across their cities, and they still have a fly tipping concern. So it's about actually people connecting with that service. When you look at fly tipping across Derby, I haven't got the exact stats in my mind, but if you think majority of the fly tipping sits within 2 wards, majority of that sits within a number of streets. So I think colleagues next to me, numbers of around 70% of fly tips occur on a set number of streets. So actually what we need to do is do more engagement on those streets. So we need to start going to those streets, start engagement, start education. We need to start pointing to people, which we have been doing, but we need to point those to the things that are already in place. So you know, we have got a facility that you can take your waste to. It is open on a Sunday, and we have got a bulky waste, we have got a voucher system, so we are going to increase the engagement on those streets. Thank you.
Yes, Steve, I saw your hand next.
When are you planning on rolling out the voucher system for the whole city? And roughly how many vouchers does £3,000 get that you've issued in Sinfin?
Thank you, Councillor. So we're looking to review and consider rolling that out from April. I suppose generally across the collections that we've had, the free voucher collections, it's been for 1 to 3 items, which we base that off the pricing model at £36. So you do get a number of collections out of the £3,000, and that has. We didn't know whether that would go at the speed of how quickly that £3,000 will go, but it has spread quite nicely, really, across the period of time that we've been trialling.
What I mean with that is, how many vouchers did you give Sinfin and Osmaston then for their £3,000 of neighbourhood board?
It's 100.
100, was it? Okay, thank you.
I'll come back to you, Councillor Bandy. Councillor Core, you were next.
Hiya. Am I right in assuming that when somebody books a collection, they don't need to mark that it's a booked collection when they put the whatever it is they're having collected out? Is that right? It's just because there was a case recently where in my ward where I took a picture of something that was outside someone's property for the PPOs, assuming that it was fly tipping. And then luckily the person came out and then informed me that actually it was being collected the next day. And I think that occurs mostly in perhaps locality 3, where there aren't front gardens. So I know it says 6:30 on the day, but you can assume that people might put it out, a day before. That's kind of the common way that people might do it. So is there any thought on, I don't know, marking, putting a piece of paper on it, sticking something on it to say this is a booked council collection, so we don't have any overlap?
Thank you, Councillor. So no, we don't expect residents to mark their collections. We can see on the device when the team goes round exactly what should be there, what items should be there. I suppose the difficulty of requesting whether collections are marked is we may end up with people fly tipping and actually replicate that. So they also may mark it. So it's probably quite difficult for us to do that. But yeah, I suppose if waste is presented outside of somebody's house and it's there and it was put there first thing in the morning, it is possible that it is bulky waste. Thank you.
Any more from anybody at all? Yep, Councillor Pandy. You were deep in thought there.
Sorry. Simon, you mentioned the problem has been ongoing for years and years, and you mentioned engagement. So where has engagement taken us? Fly tipping is on increase year after year, year after year. We've been doing engagement as well. So what have we achieved by engagement, education? Are we looking at other avenues, other solutions to tackle this problem of fly tipping especially?
Thanks, Councillor Pandy. So nationally, fly tipping is increasing. So not just Derby. This is not just a Derby issue. Nationally, the fly tipping statistics will show an increase. The impact of engagement that's had. Has the engagement reduced fly tipping as it stemmed it from going higher? We won't know that. What we have been doing is Sam's been involved with some work with Keep Britain Tidy. Around looking at how you can mark waste. So part of the problem that we will see is if people are putting waste down, because we run quite an efficient service, we're moving it quite quickly. So people then get used to that service. So what you could actually do to try and change behaviours is to mark it, crime scene tape it off, which will require you to leave it there for a few days. For people to say that is unacceptable. They have been doing some stencils on the floor in some of those areas, again, to mark the floor with stencils to say, this is a regular fly tipping space, you know, we need to try and change this behaviour. It all comes down to people's behaviours. And that's what we've got to try and resolve and try and help nudge in the right direction. And that's what it comes down to. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions from anybody at all? Yep, Councillor Cole.
I think when we talk about the engagement side, it's always going to be an ongoing thing because there's so much, especially in the inner city wards, the tenancy turnover is so high. 6 months later, you know, you've got new tenants in every property, in some streets. So are we looking at anything to target absolutely new families? So we've got somebody new moving into a property, say they sign up to the council tax and you know that that's somebody that's moved there. Is there anything going on in that kind of regard? Because I've been pushing for, well, I've been hoping for community centres, and I know in our ward we've been working on community engagement through the different community centres and places of worship where people might gather to try and, you know, get information out that way. But the biggest challenge is when somebody's new to city and, you know, this kind of thing as somebody's getting settled is never on anyone's top priority. So a lack of understanding, and also a lack of understanding of the kind of enforcement that takes place, because the enforcement is the determinant, right? That's why people don't do what they do. So is there anything looking at that new side?
Thank you, Councillor. So one of the things that we're currently exploring is some work with Keep Britain Tidy, who are helping us on particularly kind of this area. And I suppose one of the things that we're exploring is whether actually we try and get some of that support within the community. So try and train and skill up some members of the community to support each other. So if somebody moves in that's down the road, there's an awareness of who is around the area, who is new and who may need a little bit more knowledge and support around what they should be doing and how they should be disposing of their waste and other different things that comes about. So that is currently being explored. Thank you.
That sounds really positive, thank you.
Any more from anyone at all? Okay, I've got a few questions on this one. So looking at 4.12, where we look at the costings, so we brought this up briefly in exec scrutiny. So we're given the total cost of approximately £18,000. Initially, we were given a cost of £9,000 prediction for this to go. So for the benefit of everyone, I think there's only myself and Councillor Rawson that are joint members of those committees, and obviously Councillor Rawson's not with us for this meeting. What was the reason that led to it doubling in cost over the course of the year?
Thank you, Chair. So I suppose when we initially looked at the 2 weeks worth of trials, or free collections, should I say, we scoped that and financed it based on an average income collections over the year. Now, what we have had is 100% take-up of the free collections, which has changed the pricing for that. Realistically, that 18,000 is at the maximum that it's going to be, because what we haven't factored in is some of them collections were fridges and freezers, which do come at a lower cost. So it's likely to be just shy of that 18, but nearer to 18 than 9. Thank you.
Okay, can I just to drill in on that a little bit, because surely we guessed that every free slot would be taken up. I mean, we've got all throughout the year people are paying for these slots. We're suddenly saying this service that you pay for you can have for free if you just wait 3 weeks if you're wanting a bit earlier, or be ready a week early, you can have it for free. So why would we not scope it at the maximum cost and have that be the cost that we budgeted for? Because, like I say, if you're providing a service that people pay for and suddenly you decide to do it for free, I'd have thought everybody would immediately sign up for that, but we seem to have scoped at a lower cost. I'm just wondering what led us to doing that, because we're not only obviously in the position where it's doubled, but also I remember in the initial meeting we looked at whether a reduced street cleanse budget could help fund some other things we did, and obviously it's not been able to do that because we've doubled the cost in this instance. So how did we come to a decision not to scope at 100% take up for the most expensive and budget in that way?
Thanks, Chair. To be honest, it was an officer error. So as Sam has alluded to, when we calculated the price the budget required to do that, what we did was looked at the income taken per year and divided it by per week. So for 2 weeks, so it's 4.5 a week, 9 for the 2. What we didn't do is do it the opposite way around, which was actually go 1 to 3 items by 500 collections. So there was an error in the maths as we were putting this together. However, like Sam has mentioned, some of the items have been fridges, which means they are cheaper than the 1 to 3 items. So it was an office an error.
Okay, thanks, Simon. I think it's a shame that the cabinet member didn't spot that and pull that one up for you guys as well. But I think it's where we are ultimately with the budget position. I think it's a shame we've ended up where we are, but at least it shows that the take-up was there for all the slots, and that waste that otherwise would have cost people money has managed to be taken in this way. So at least that's the positive I think we can take out of that. Looking at 4.16, so we mentioned earlier obviously the 2 wards that have got the sort of more significant issue than others. I'm assuming those wards would be Arboretum and Normanton, where we see the highest levels of fly tipping. So what led to Simfin and Osmaston being chosen as the ward that the voucher scheme was trialled in, rather than Arboretum or Normanton?
Thank you, Chair. So it was a proposal put forward, to be honest, by the neighbourhood officer and the neighbourhood manager within the Simfin and Osmaston areas, which we just used them to, well, that ward, to trial this approach. So that isn't to say that Simfin and Osmaston has the most fly tips or the least fly tips or most in need, but it was where the trial initiated, really. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So how do we, looking forward at this one, how do we see we've still got 2 systems really. We have the system where we have the 2 free weeks, and then we have the voucher scheme system. And obviously the voucher scheme system has only been trialled in Simfin and Osmaston, but Simfin and Osmaston still ranks, I think it's second in take-up for the bulky waste collection on the 2 free weeks. So it would almost suggest that we need almost 2 systems in effect to deal with the sheer amount of bulky waste that is being produced in the city. And even then, we're still seeing fly tipping go up by, I think it was 21% in total across the city. So we almost need 2 systems to combat it, and still the amount is going up. So do we see this progressing as 2 different systems? Do we see sort of moving away from the 2 free weeks and going to the voucher system? What sort of way forward are we seeing at this point?
Thank you, Chair. As you'll be aware, the 6-month review of the household recycling centre and the bulky waste that went to full cabinet, full council recently. That is also in the public domain for public consultation to see what's going to happen with that. So we're not in a position to say whether it will be 1 or 2 schemes. If there is a desire to following the public consultation, the MTFB process, to not offer the free bulky waste collections anymore, then it would just be 1. But if there isn't a desire for that to happen, then there would probably be 2 different schemes. Thank you.
Okay, and if the voucher scheme, if we do decide to go with that one, would that be rolled out across the whole city, or would that be sort of ward dependent? So just look at the wording in 4.16 where it says that it could be scaled up to cover other all ward areas where car ownership and disposable income is limited. That would suggest a few wards, not all wards in the city. So do we see the voucher scheme being the whole city or just some areas?
Thank you, Chair. So I suppose there's a potential of this going into all wards. There is pockets of deprivation in some of the wards that generally you would consider to be more affluent than others. I suppose it really depends on the need. So we would take a balanced approach to how we roll that out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sam. And that really is what I would urge to lobby for, really, is around that balanced approach, because it sort of worried me seeing that kind of all ward areas in there, because exactly what you said, there are pockets of deprivation in each ward. And I know when the figures came out, and Oakwood ward being up there, I think 3rd place, there was a perception of, oh, that's an affluent ward benefiting. And I was saying, well, there are parts of Oakwood that are affluent, and there are parts of Oakwood that are not affluent. There are parts of Oakwood more deprived than other areas. Obviously, we have, given the size that Oakwood is, it's not just the Oakwood neighbourhood. We have a portion of the Chaddeston estate in our ward, which is a little bit more deprived than other areas of it. And within Oakwood, there are pockets of deprivation as well. So anything around rolling it out just, this ward gets it and this ward doesn't, I'd really, really discourage against, because It will allow affluent people in more socially deprived wards to benefit, while more deprived people in more affluent wards wouldn't. And Spondon always strikes that to me as a case that I remember of meeting someone sort of saying it was summer last year, who was in a fairly sizable property. You would think a fairly affluent family lived there, who was actually reliant on food banks, who was really, really struggling, but who'd taken the approach of the house is the last thing I will get rid of because I feel like I failed if I lose the house. So would have sold everything in the house, but continued to live in a house where you would have thought somebody affluent would reside. And if we were to go on a ward-by-ward basis, somebody like that wouldn't be eligible for it, whereas somebody, a landlord that owned 7 or 8 properties but happened to live in a socially deprived ward would be eligible for something like that for their own personal use. So I'm glad to hear that we're still in that sort of deciding phase of what to do. My real advice would be around making sure that it's not on a ward-by-ward basis, that it looks at those indexes that are there and ensures that all wards in some form have got an entitlement to it. And looking at the voucher scheme, just one last time on that one, if that's the scheme that goes forwards, whether it's sort of with the 2 weeks or without, would we see it being reliant on neighbourhood board funding across the city, or do we think we might have other funding streams that could be tapped into to cover either some or all of that cost?
Thank you, Chair. Initially, it is reliant on the neighbourhood board funding as it stands now. There is something that we could scope further and maybe look at the MTFP for in the future, but at the moment it is linked to the neighbourhood boards. Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you. And I hope that the leadership and the Cabinet, if this is as good a scheme as we're being told, and if the feedback is on that, will find a way to provide the funding to deliver that across the city to ensure that benefits everybody. Okay, so that was all the questions I had. I'll just check with members if there's any further questions that have come from any of that. No, fantastic. In that case, I thank the three of you for your attendance at the meeting and for providing the report for us. And I think we'll hopefully be able to bring something back that looks at the feedback that was received and what we decide to go with, and then how that performs going forward. Of course, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, or you're welcome to leave if not. Okay, so thank you all for that one. So we'll move on then to item 6 on our agenda, which is section 106, affordable housing acquisitions. So Karen, of course, is over to you. And of course, members will remember that this report came from our discussion last time around section 106 and some elements of funding that we queried.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is basically trying to, or presentation is outlining some of the issues relating to the delivery of section 106, to explain how the figures are calculated when they are being discussed, and when section 106 become applicable for delivery as well. Next slide, thanks. Okay, so I thought it might be useful just to outline some of the differences between DCC and Derby Homes. So DCC, we own all of the council houses, and Derby Homes are our managing agent. However, they are also a registered provider with Homes England, and they do own and have their own existing stock. So all of the income from the council houses goes into the housing revenue account, which is a ring-fenced account, and all costs for the properties must be met from that account. That account cannot be used for general fund services. So DCC, we are also an RP with Homes England. Both of us can actually apply for grant to help deliver homes. The difference is that we can actually spend the housing revenue income and we can also borrow through the Public Works Loan Board. Derby Homes actually have a higher borrowing cost than DCC do because they can't access PWLB. We can then use our right to buy receipts to help others to deliver in the form of grant. That's not something we do very often, but we also use our right to buy receipts for delivering new homes. We cannot allow Derby Homes to use our HRA. The right to buy use was previously at 30% of the cost. That has gradually increased up to 50%, and recently it changed to 100%. That means we spend the right to buy receipts quicker, which doesn't really help Derby because we are actually on target with our right to buy spend. So it does mean that if we applied 100% right to buy receipts, we would just get through the receipts quicker. Next slide, please. So, Section 106, affordable housing. So we have a threshold where it is only delivered on sites of 15 or more. The provision at the moment is a maximum of 30% affordable housing, of which 25% can actually be first homes. And this is a discounted sale product, but it is still classed as an affordable home. It's sold at 30 to 50% below market value, but it is sold in perpetuity. So that means when it comes to a resale, it must be sold at the same value, below market value, as the original owner purchased it at. At the moment, we're not seeing any developers offering a 50% discount. The minimum they can offer is 30, so that is what they're offering. When we look at the affordable housing, we normally would do an 80-20 split between rent and shared ownership. That can cause a bit of an issue if either ourselves or Derby Homes purchase properties on one of the Section 106 sites, because we don't normally do shared ownership. Developers also would need our approval for the RP that they sell the affordable housing to. There is a recent change in the unsold Section 106 properties. They are looking at those going onto a central register for external RPs to actually offer on. And that is because there is such an issue at the moment with RPs actually declining properties for purchase on Section 106 sites. If we don't actually receive on site, we can have a commuted sum. So the commuted sum is actually the discount that we would have got from the property. So if we would have managed to purchase at sort of 50% for rent and 60% for shared ownership, if we were getting commuted sum, then we would get 50% for the rent and 40% for any of the shared ownership. So it is a lower figure than we would get. The commuted sum can actually be spent anywhere in the city and not just in the ward of the development it is received from. If you can imagine that obviously some of the inner city wards, there is a lack of development area within those, and if it was only spent in the ward of the development, it would mean that we weren't able to take those commuted sums and spend them within the inner city wards. Also, Homes England grant can only be used on what's classed as additionality or a site that is 100% affordable. So if a site comes to us and they say, we want to do all affordable on this, the registered provider that's delivering it can actually apply for Homes England grant. If it is agreed that only 30% or even it can go down lower to 10% is what is affordable for the developer to deliver, if we secure additional properties above that percentage, then a grant can be applied for. Next slide, please. So just to give you an example of the delivery numbers, so like I say, the maximum is 30%. It's more often that we do get 10%. Over the past probably about 4 to 5 years, there's only been approximately 2 sites that have actually delivered 30% affordable. So if we look at a site of 200, we would get 60 properties at 30%, 20 at 10%. If we then deduct the first homes, it would then be reduced, so we would get 45 and 15. We then split out the rent and the shared ownership on the 80-20 split. You can see there we would get 36 and 9 or 12 and 3. If we had got a site where the developer didn't want to do first homes, we obviously then do get a better number, and we would get 48 rent and 12 shared ownership, or 16 and 4, again depending on the percentages. If we then look, because obviously we don't get that many sites of 200 within Derby, if we looked at a smaller site of say 50, you can then see how the figures are significantly impacted on the 30% and the 10%, especially where first homes are then taking some of the delivery numbers, and we can be down as low as 3 and 1 if we were only getting 10% on a site of 50. Again, it improves if first homes are not being delivered, but it only takes it up to 4 and 1. The reason I've actually included this is to demonstrate that for a registered provider, it's not always appealing to take such a low number of properties, because they've got to have the management in place to be looking after those in that area, which contributes towards registered providers declining to purchase on Section 106 sites. Next slide, please. So, RPs and the Section 106 sites. So, affordable housing letting is normally based on property sizes. And I've put in there, so it's a 1-bed 2-person, 2-bed 4-person, 3-bed 5-person, 4-bed 6-person. Very often what we find is on a Section 106 site, a 3-bed property may only be what we would class as a 3-bed 4-person. Or it would be really what we would say would be a 2-bed with a study. And it's because they are built to a lower space standard than we would normally deliver affordable housing on. Property size, if it's below what we would normally be looking for, it would receive a lower offer, but a lot of the developers still calculate it at what they are expecting to receive for that property. We also then have to consider that affordable rent is normally 80% of the market value rent, and that must include the service charge. Many sites are now charging a maintenance fee for grounds, and we have to contain that within the affordable rent. RPs also have what they call as investor status with Homes England, so they have to deliver the grant units, and as they can't use grant on the normal Section 106 numbers, that's another reason why they are declining to purchase the properties. We also find that the providers are actually maximising delivery numbers with limited staff resources, so they can actually find it easier to deliver a 100% affordable site of 50 properties than they can if they're just working with a developer to deliver half a dozen or so on a Section 106 site. There is also a focus on existing stock, not new at the moment, because there is all the ombudsman and the improvements that are having to be made to bring properties up to minimum EPC rating. Unfortunately, with a flatted development, which is what a lot of the inner city projects now are, there are different size standards between the flats, so what we would be looking to achieve, and that's very challenging in a flatted development. So if you've got a developer building to a smaller space standard, they would normally replicate that floor on floor, and we would be asking for a slightly larger property, so that impacts on their designs. Many developments also contain studio apartments, and ourselves and the RPs do not tend to do studios as affordable. There is also a greater caution on flats and fire safety since Grenfell. Private rented sector, it delivers a greater return to investors than affordable housing, so it is more appealing, again, for developers to sell to PRS than affordable. There is, again, an issue with service charge for communal areas, and, again, it must be contained within the overall service charge and rent that an RP is charging. There is also limited mortgage availability for shared ownership. And when we look at a flat, once you have the mortgage and then you're paying a rent and a service charge, it does become unaffordable for many people. There is also compliance data for regulatory bodies that an affordable housing provider has to provide, and it can be very difficult to obtain that data from the freeholder or the managing agent for those properties. Next slide, please. There was a question at the last scrutiny meeting about the DRI site. So there were viability issues, and that was actually supported by the district valuer, and it was determined that they couldn't viably provide any affordable housing on the site, and that was in part due to the retention of the pepper pots. Instead, the developer did offer to provide 5% affordable instead of an overage agreement, which is where it goes back and it's revalued at a later date to see whether any affordable could be delivered. Subsequent to that, it was found that the offer for the 5% was actually based on a higher percentage purchase price for the affordable rented homes, higher than any of the RPs would normally expect to be paying for a Section 106 site, which is why RPs declined to offer. There were 8 shared ownership houses delivered on the site. Negotiations were held with the developer for Derby Homes to purchase the affordable properties, but again, they couldn't reach agreement on the property price, and the developer was expressing concerns over any cost increases between agreeing a purchase price and the programmed delivery. So a commuted sum was actually paid on the DRI site. Next slide, please. We are actually purchasing on Section 106 sites at the moment. At the moment, DCC are purchasing 3 adapted properties on the meadows at Snelsmoor and 4 adapted at Holbrook Park. Derby Homes are, in their own right, are purchasing 24 general needs housing at the meadows, 13 general needs houses at Snelsmoor, and they are purchasing 15 at Manor Kingsway. The reason it is split between adapted properties and general needs properties is the right to buy risk with general needs properties. That has changed recently since we entered into contract for these purchases, because the cost floor threshold, which is the amount of money we invest in purchasing and maintaining a property, has now changed from 15 years to 30 years. So going forward, it does open up for DCC to actually purchase more properties on Section 106 and not have such a reliance on Derby Homes. Next slide, please. So going forward, there is currently a consultation on the right to buy rules, and that response is currently being signed off. That covers a lower discount and it being capped, a requirement for tenants to be in a property longer before they are actually allowed to do right to buy. Also looking at regional variations, that it would reflect more the actual housing market in Derby. It would also be beneficial if Homes England would allow registered providers to include the Section 106 units in their delivery figures, and also making the design standards that we would deliver affordable housing to, make them mandatory for all properties. So at the moment we have the National Described Space Standards, but they are optional. We work to them, but developers don't normally work to them. If they were made mandatory, it would allow for greater parity across property types. Also, if it was possible to limit the viability in the developer margins. So at the moment, there is a fixed percentage that a developer is expected to make on a Section 106 site. There was also a comment, I think, at the last meeting about the Derby Homes reserves, and it's just to highlight that those reserves have actually been identified for other projects, such as fleet replacement, some corporate priorities, so that is for some specific property types, for care leavers, which DCC cannot provide because of the general fund implications. But DH would actually potentially need loan funding if they were to start purchasing more and delivering more on Section 106 sites. So next slide. So thank you, and any questions?
Wonderful, thank you for that report, Karen. I think one of the most technical and in-depth ones we've had on a very specific area for a long time, so thank you so much for talking us through it in the way that you have done. Any questions from members of the committee at all? Councillor Pandey.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for the presentation. I would make a suggestion for the future presentation. If you can use the full words rather than abbreviations, because even I was struggling to deduce the abbreviations in that presentation at times. So if you can have the full words, that will help us to understand a bit better. And the question is, as we know, Derby Homes is, you bought few properties in Mackworth as well, and you're building housing, affordable housing there. I want to know how much does the delay cost if there's a delay in delivering those projects? How does it affect Derby Homes in terms of revenue generation or revenue? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pandy. Just to say that generally within the presentation, the first time it's written in full, and it's subsequent to that I would use the acronyms, but in future I will try and use the full throughout the whole presentation. Specifically with regards to the site that you're referring to, that is not a Derby Homes Limited development, that is actually a DCC development. So Derby Homes are not affected by any delay to those properties. They will go as general needs affordable housing, and they will be let through Home Finder. Derby Homes will manage those properties upon completion. Generally within the contracts, we work to a contract programme. If that contract programme is exceeded, then there are normally penalties built into a contract.
So, sorry, just to get clarification on it. So first thing you're saying, the Derby Homes are pretty good with the timing of developing projects, right? If I understood it correctly, Derby Homes are doing really good. They're not having delayed projects.
This is why I included the slide about the difference between DCC and Derby Homes. A lot of the projects that are being delivered at the moment are DCC projects. They're not Derby Homes Limited projects, although Derby Homes have been working on some of the smaller projects that have been managed and are being built out by the Capital Works team. The larger projects where they are being delivered by external developers, they are actually being delivered within DCC. But ones such as the Chesapeake project, although that was being built out by the Capital Works team, that is a DCC owned project.
Sorry, just to get this clarification. So the delay in housing projects, as you're saying, especially if they are DCC managed, the loss of revenue is borne by DCC. Am I correct?
We normally factor in a penalty into the contract, so we wouldn't actually lose revenue. The penalty would normally be a weekly rent loss. So if a project overran by 6 weeks, there is normally a penalty in, and we would be asking the developer for the rent loss that we would incur because of their delay in delivering the properties.
Thank you for that again. So if DCC was responsible for the delay, then DCC will bear the cost.
Yes, if it was our liability, if it was our responsibility for the delay.
Councillor Falk.
I'd just like to thank you for the presentation. I'd just like to ask, you were saying about if S106 is in one area, it doesn't necessarily have to be all spent on that. It can be so, like the new site at Snelsmore Lane that's in my ward. So if all the money wasn't allocated there, somebody could allocate to, say, build a small shopping area in Normanton Ward.
If the commuted sum is for affordable housing, it must be used to deliver affordable housing, but that affordable housing can be delivered anywhere in the city. And like I say, the reason for that would be that obviously if we took Arboretum Ward, we've got very limited land, but we would be able to potentially purchase properties off of the open market and use those to deliver affordable housing. So it's not just focused on new build or, like I say, the ward that the commuted sum has come from. And it's identified corporately as to the projects that we would look at allocating the Section 106 commuted sums to.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from any members at all? No, okay, thank you. Just two quick ones from myself. We've mentioned there around the commuted sums and that they can be spent anywhere in the city. Is it limited just to the city? Because my thought on it would be we have sort of agreements with Amber Valley and South Derbyshire around there taking some of our housing growth on the outskirts of the city. So the development's almost built with Derby in mind, but built just across the border. And Arawash can't seem to make up its mind whether it's taking our housing growth or just building bolt-ons to areas. So is there any element that the commuted sums could be spent on providing sort of affordable housing that caters for Derby but is located just across the city's border, or is that something that's not allowed?
We can do, and we do actually own stock outside of the city. So we have purchased properties recently at Buttercup Lees. So yeah, we do actually own some stock in Amber Valley, and we do own some stock in South Derbyshire. And it is because we are so constrained and we have such demand.
Is that something that we see becoming sort of more and more a feature of what we have to do, given obviously we're struggling at the minute in the local plan to demonstrate the housing needs and things like that?
Yes, it is something we are having to look at in greater detail, but also working with colleagues in our neighbouring authorities on the best way that our affordable housing need, which includes, it's not just our, sales stock, it has to be the affordable housing as well.
Okay, and the final question was something we touched on a bit in the pre-meet, was just around service charges. So as most members will know, when developers are building new estates, there's a tendency now to retain parts of the land and add the service charges on, which can be quite considerable amounts of money over the course of a year. How do service charges fit into all of this?
So on the service charges, because we charge an affordable rent, that's 80% of the market rent, that has to include all of the service charges. So that's your rent and the service charge element. One of the things that we are finding is that the service charge starts out at a slightly lower cost, and then it gradually increases year on year. And it's not uncommon for an additional £1,200 or up to £1,600 on top of on a yearly basis for the service charge. That starts becoming prohibitively expensive when you are only charging 80% of the market rent. So that is another reason why, because there generally tends to be a higher service charge on flatted developments, that is why there is it's a lot harder to deliver affordable housing in a flatted development. But it is becoming more common on housing developments as well.
I think with service charges seeming to become more the norm, I mean, of the two new developments in my ward, both have got service charges on them. I would imagine any future ones would also look to do the same thing. It shows, I think, the concerning position we're in going forwards around how it can make having affordable housing not affordable for people and also not affordable for the council and for Derby Homes in some instances. So I think it shows the concerning direction I think we're going in there.
I think it is worth saying as well that we have spoken to other colleagues in other authorities of a similar size to Derby, and this is something we're all facing. It is an issue across the across the country. It's not, again, it's not exclusive to Derby. We're all facing the same challenges, and we're all coming up with the same issues, especially in relation to service charges.
I think, did we say Rotherham was one of the councils that we spoke to around that? Yeah, I've got some friends in their opposition group on Rotherham Council, and they were talking about this issue a few weeks ago as well. Any further questions for any members of the committee at all? Yep, Councillor Nawaz.
When somebody buys a house off the council, what sort of percentage do they have to have?
This is one of the recent changes. It depends on how long they've been a tenant. It also depends on the property type. So somebody could move in and they could actually apply for right to buy after they'd been a tenant for 3 years. If somebody was a longer term tenant and it was a flat, they could actually get a maximum discount of up to 70%. So that is one of the changes that is currently being discussed and is being proposed for change, as well as, like I say, looking at whether somebody should be a tenant for longer than 3 years before they're actually eligible for any form of a discount. I think when Right to Buy first came in, it was targeting people that had been, you know, they were long-term tenants. They'd been in the properties for, you know, 20 years and had paid the rent for that length of time. Whereas if somebody has only been a tenant for 3 years, that's quite a change.
Any more at all? No, fantastic. In that case, Karen, thank you so much for the report and presenting it. I think if you'd be able to send it to Lindsay, who could circulate it around all members, that'd be fantastic. And I guess we'll look out to see what comes back from the new work that the government's doing, looking into this area, and see what comes back from that.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you everybody. So that moves us on to item 7. It's our work programme for 24-25. So obviously many of you will have seen an email from Lindsay. If you haven't replied to it, please do, so we'll get another meeting in around April. As always, I'm happy to take suggestions from any members about any reports we ought to consider. I think we're going to look at a report for that one on nighttime economy and safety in the nighttime economy, especially city centre, and from a VORG aspect as well. And if anyone's got any other recommendations, please do let myself and the Vice Chair know, and we'll see if we can get it on the agenda. With that element, I'll thank you all for attending the meeting today, and we'll formally close. Thank you all.